Senator Paul, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Let's get right to the debate of the day, and that is over the future of Iraq. Last year on this program, we were talking about Syria, and at that time, you said there was no clear-cut American interest. Do you see a clear-cut American interest in Iraq?
I see mostly confusion and chaos, and I think some of the chaos is created from getting involved in the Syrian civil war. You have to realize that some of the Islamic rebels that we've been supporting are actually allies of the group that is now in Iraq causing all this trouble. But I see that in the Syrian civil war, we're sending arms and opposing Iranian proxies. Now some people want us to get involved, allied with Iranian Guard, even maybe fighting alongside.
But before you get to that, ISIS as a terrorist organization has been billed by many as a clear and present danger to the United States, as a terrorist actor. Do you see that?
I look at it on a personal basis. I ask, do I want to send one of my sons or your son to fight to regain Mosul? And I think, well, yeah, these are nasty terrorists. Shouldn't we want to kill them? But I think, who should want to stop them more? Maybe the people who live there. Should not the Shiites, the Maliki government, should they not stand up? And if they're ripping their uniforms off and fleeing, if they don't think Mosul's worth saving, how am I going to convince my son or your son to die for Mosul? I know they're bad terrorists, and yes, we should prevent them from exporting terror, but I'm not so sure where the clear-cut American interest is.
Well, is the clear-cut American interest to protect America if these are terrorists who design to hit America?
Right. Well, I think if they are, then maybe we shouldn't be funding their allies and supporting them in Syria. You see, they're emboldened because we've been supporting them. It could be that Assad had wiped these people out months ago. So what we do is we get in a confusing situation, and I personally believe that this group would not be in Iraq and would not be as powerful had we not been supplying their allies in the war, as well as our allies are funding these people. They probably have weapons that were bought either with Saudi money or Kuwaiti money or Qatar money. A lot of the radicals have been getting arms and money from these countries.
So do you support the president who says, like you do, look, the Iraqis should stand up and fight them, but he also wants to send 300 advisors there to help out?
I don't question the 300 advisors for this reason. I'm not sure exactly where they're going or what they're doing. I do think that we have an embassy there, and we've got 1,000, 2,000 people there, that yes, we have to defend our embassy. So I'm not going to nitpick the president and say, oh, you shouldn't send in a certain amount of advisors. And the military decisions of protecting the embassy, to me, are very important. I've been talking a lot about Benghazi and how we didn't protect them, so I'm not going to get involved to criticize the president for trying to protect our embassy there.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney has been quite critical of this president. He wrote an op-ed this week in which he said, in part, rarely has a U.S. president been so wrong about so much at the expense of so many. Too many times to count, Mr. Obama has told us he is ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan as though wishing makes it so. Do you think Dick Cheney is a credible critic of this president?
I think the same questions could be asked of those who supported the Iraq war. You know, were they right in their predictions? Were there weapons of mass destruction there? That's what the war was sold on. Was democracy easily achievable? Was the war won in 2005 when many of these people said it was won? They didn't really, I think, understand the civil war that would break out. And what's going on now, I don't blame on President Obama. Has he really got the solution? Maybe there is no solution. But I do blame the Iraq war on the chaos that is in the Middle East. I also blame those who are for the Iraq war for emboldening Iran. These are the same people now who are petrified of what Iran may become, and I understand some of their worry.
You're not a Dick Cheney Republican when it comes to American power in the Middle East.
What I would say is that the war emboldened Iran. Iran is much more of a threat because of the Iraq war than they were before. Before there was a standoff between Sunnis and Shiites. Now there is Iranian hegemony throughout the region.
Has President Obama made America less safe and less respected in that part of the world?
Yeah. I don't think I would put it that way. I disagree with the president I disagree with him on the Libyan incursion and with arming the Syrian rebels. With ending the war in Iraq, I've been trying to end it for years. In fact, you know, one of the important constitutional questions here is what authority does anyone have to go to war in Iraq? I've been trying to take that authority away. I introduced a vote in the Senate about a year or two ago, and we only got about 33, 34 votes to end the war, even though it's over. But here's my point is that can one generation bind another generation? Can the people you elected in 2002 who voted to go to war in 2002, does that bind us forever? Are we at war forever? No geographic limit and no temporal or time limit on this? I think there has to be a limit, and that if we go to war again, and I'm not saying we never go to war. That's why I've even said I don't rule out airstrikes. But if we're going to go to war, there needs to be a vote of the American people through their representatives. We need to have a consensus that, yes, it is worth dying to regain Mosul, even though the Shiites and the people who live there are not willing to fight for it.
You have blamed Republicans and Democrats over the past 10-plus years for the prosecution of foreign policy. That would include Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. If she's a candidate for president, and if you're a candidate for president, is this the main argument against her candidacy in a campaign by you?
I think if you want to be commander-in-chief, the bar you have to cross is, will you defend the country? Will you provide adequate security? And that's why Benghazi is not a political question for me. To me, it's not the talking points. That's never been the most important part of Benghazi. It's the 6 months leading up to Benghazi where there were multiple requests for more security, and it never came. This was under Hillary Clinton's watch. She will have to overcome that, and we will make her answer for Benghazi.
Let me turn to some domestic matters. On the issue of immigration, big issue in the Republican Party right now, Eric Cantor losing in part because of that. A lot of that Tea Party grassroots activism, which is part of the base that you excite in the Republican Party, really opposing any move toward what is called amnesty. Here's Rupert Murdoch, the executive chairman of News Corp, runs Fox News among other properties, and he writes this week: "We need to give those individuals who are already here after they've passed checks to ensure they are not dangerous criminals a path to citizenship so they can pay their full taxes, be counted, and become more productive members of our community." Is this call, which is basically what others would call amnesty, something that the party needs to rethink its opposition to?
I think that everyone needs to be for some form of immigration reform because the status quo is untenable. So I consider myself a bridge to the conservative community because I am about as conservative as they come, maybe a little libertarian too. But I think that if we do nothing, 11 million more people may be coming illegally. So we have to do something. But here's the conundrum, and I think the conundrum has really been pointed out by the children being dumped on the border right now. There's a humanitarian disaster of 50,000 kids being dumped on this side of our border. It's because you have a beacon, forgiveness, and you don't have a secure border. So that's why conservatives who are for immigration reform, I am for immigration reform, but I insist that you secure the border first, because if you have a beacon of some kind of forgiveness without a secure border, the whole world will come.
Is a pathway to citizenship amnesty in your book?
I think that's the whole point. That's the whole problem. This is, what is amnesty? Because I'll give you an example. The platform in one state that I was in recently says no deportation and no amnesty. Well, if you're not going to deport people, you are somehow changing the current law, because the current law says everybody must go.
But you said the party should give up this word amnesty.
I think we need to get beyond it. But we also need to get beyond the status quo, because the status quo is not acceptable. So I am for pushing and trying to say to my conservatives across the country, we need some form of immigration reform, border security first, but then we should have something that allows people who want to work in our country, who are here. I say we will find a place for you if you want to work, and we link it to work.
Right.
Because as Republicans,
and a path to citizenship?
Well, the path to citizenship is the longer, is a more difficult goal.
But you don't rule it out as an end game.
What I would say is, at this point in time, I don't think any immigration reform will get out of Washington that includes a path to citizenship. But I do think that there is a path to a secure border and an expanded work visa program.
You are championing another piece of legislation that could be controversial, but it focuses an area where you think you can work with Democrats. Here's something you said last year. If I told you that 1 out of 3 African-American males is forbidden by law from voting, you might think I was talking about Jim Crow 50 years ago. Yet today, 1/3 of African-American males are still prevented from voting because of the war on drugs. What do you mean, and what do you want to do about it?
It's the biggest voting rights issue of our day. We've gotten distracted by a lot of other things. We think there may be 1 million people are prevented from voting from having a previous felony conviction. I'll give you an example. I have a friend whose brother 30 years ago grew marijuana plants in college. He made a mistake. He probably would tell you now it's a mistake. He still can't vote, and every time he goes to get a job, he has to check a box that says convicted felon. It prevents you from employment. So if we're the party of family values and keeping families together, and a party that believes in redemption and second chances, we should be for letting people have the right to vote back. And I think the face of the Republican Party needs to be not about suppressing vote, but about enhancing the vote. So I have a bill that I'm going to introduce next week. If it comes forward, would allow somewhere between 500,000 people to 1 million people to get the right to vote back.
And you have some Democratic support on this.
Well, we have, yeah, it's going to be a mixture. My bill only does nonviolent felons, and I'm the only one on my bill. There's another bill by Senator Cardin, which I support the concept, but maybe not the whole thing. It allows all felons to get the right to vote back after they've served time. So there's a little bit of give, but there are a lot of us who are, and I would say that Senator Cardin, I'm on his side of the concept, maybe not quite there on the bill, but we both have bills that are driving this concept forward.
Some other action in the Senate has to do with the controversy around the Washington Redskins. 50 Democratic senators saying that the NFL should force the Redskins to change their name because they believe the Redskins' name is a slur. Do you agree with that? Would you support that in the Senate?
I'm not much for government getting involved in the NFL. I don't really have a personal, private or public opinion on, what the Redskins' name should be. I do think that for the most part, particularly professional sports, has the ability, because they make special contracts, to really force people to do stuff, and they can. So there could be something, we had the recent controversy in basketball and all that stuff. There are contracts that talk about behavior. I don't know with the name. I think sometimes, for example, I think sometimes we get distracted by things when they're more important things. Like on the voting thing, we've had all kinds of discussion about voter ID and this and that, but really what is the most important issue, not enough people are talking about, is that 1 million people are prevented from voting, literally and legally prevented from voting because they have a previous conviction. So I think that's a bigger issue than all the other stuff that we've spent a lot of time talking about.
We're in a big election year. I have one final question on Hillary Clinton in a moment, but I want to show you something from our poll that's daunting for both parties. The president's in a world of trouble, 41% approval rating, but look at the status of the Democratic versus Republican Party. The Republican Party is less popular and viewed more negatively than the Democratic Party when a lot of these midterm races are viewed as a referendum on the incumbent president. Why is that the case?
I think Washington in general is unpopular, the president and Congress, because we seem dysfunctional, and we are dysfunctional. And I'll give you an example. I'm really pushing repatriation, letting money come home from overseas and building roads with it. This is something where we would lower taxes, brings in more tax revenue, and we build roads, something everybody is for. And it's like pulling teeth to get Washington to vote on it and to pass it. But if it actually came forward, if they let us have a vote in the Senate, I think there's 70 votes for it in the Senate.
On Hillary Clinton, you said she'll be made to pay for Benghazi. How?
She will have to explain how she can be commander-in-chief when she was not responsive to multiple requests for more security in the 6 months leading up. Plus, there were a lot of expenditures at the State Department under her watch. $650,000 was spent on Facebook ads when they didn't have enough money for security. $5 million was spent on crystal glassware that summer. So there's a lot of expenditures that she approved, but she wouldn't approve a 16-person personnel team, and she wouldn't approve an airplane to help them get around the country. In the last 24 hours, a plane was very important, and it wasn't available. These are really serious questions beyond talking points that occurred under her watch.
Benghazi is disqualifying for her?
I think so. I don't think the American people want a commander-in-chief that will send reinforcements, that will defend the country, and that will provide the adequate security. And I think in the moment of need, a long moment, a 6-month moment, she wasn't there.
Senator Rand Paul, as always, thank you for your views.
Thank you.